Hello friends, hope you and yours are all doing good and staying safe as we eagerly wait for our main street economies to resume so that we can move on with our life and our livelihood. This is the third video in our COVID series in as many months since we published our first video in April. And since then we have been getting very good viewership, with many of you writing back to us with your questions. We had thought of waiting a bit longer before doing this video so that we can address most of your top questions. But then yesterday, Friday, June 5, we had some very important groundbreaking data coming out of United States, due to which we could not wait any longer and had to go ahead with this video. If you have been listening to our previous videos, you had seen that we have been advocating all along that we will have a V-shaped recovery post the meltdown that happened in our financial markets and in our economy due to COVID. And we had reasons for that. The foremost of those being that COVID crisis is actually to us an exogenous shock. A shock similar to this we have witnessed during the 9/11 terrorist attacks, or even during the Black Monday of 1987. We believe that it is incorrect and on our part to compare this with that of the global financial crisis or the dot-com bubble bust or even the Great Depression of 1929. We also showed you data points that reveal that during an exogenous shock, whatever has been the trajectory of the market, whether it is upward or downward, once the after effect or the aftermath of the shock has been absorbed, the markets resumed their trajectory in the same direction. Like in 1987, it continued to keep rising after the Black Monday, while in case of 9/11 it continued to keep going down. We walked into this COVID crisis this time on the back of a 10-year-long bull run that started in 2010, and the indices were at their near or all-time high, and hence we had predicted that after the initial aftershock of the COVID crisis has been absorbed, the markets will continue their upward journey. And that's what precisely happened with the financial markets, with a bottom that got formed on March 23rd. We had also explained to you that we walked into this COVID crisis at a time when the consumer confidence in America was at its peak. When the American savings rates were as high as 7 and 8%. But then, because of a constant fear of recession due to protracted bull run, inverted yield curves, as well as posturing by America and China against each other on trade and tariffs, the producer or the business's confidence were rather low. The producers were holding back, as a result of which, when we walked into COVID, there were hardly any inventory overhang. And remember, inventory overhang or protracted inventory overhang is one of the key reasons that history has shown us again and again that causes recession and depression. We also proved to you that because of this, once we absorb the shock from COVID, probably the businesses has to catch up and get back or get their acts back quickly. During the 2 months of lockdown that happened in April and May, what we realized also and shared with you also is that the American savings rate have actually gone up from 7-8% to 13% in April, and then to almost 17-18% in May. That's like a unheard of savings rate, leaving a lot of headroom for consumption to be made. On the other hand, during this period of lockdown, America has a huge loss of jobs. But this loss of job has not affected American consumption to that extent. To put in numbers, the job loss is almost like 15-16%, nearing about a 20 million number. But the loss in consumption is about 5%. It is essentially because the job loss has been mostly affecting people who are at the bottom of the pyramid. People who have inelastic demand and who has a larger chunk of their consumption going into consumer staples rather than consumer discretionary. We had also explained to you in the earlier videos that this situation is very different from what we saw during the global financial crisis of 2008, when the middle layer of the pyramid lost its job. A layer that has got very high propensity for discretionary consumption. During this period, we also saw that while more and more COVID cases were getting reported each day, the financial markets in America snapped back and they resumed their upward journey, reclaiming much of the losses or the meltdown that they have suffered earlier. This made most of us believe that there is a huge disjoint between the Main Street and the Wall Street. Made us believe that there is a bubble, there are froths, and we are getting set up for yet another perfect storm. And that's where yesterday, for the first time, we saw some startling data coming out from America. The month of May jobs data that was released yesterday morning showed that United States economy has gained back 2.5 million jobs. As against this, the consensus prediction was that there will be another 7.5 million job loss. So between the prediction and the actuals, between the estimates and the actuals, there has been a mean reversion of almost 10 million jobs. That's huge. Despite that, it is early days, no doubt about it. But clearly, this is the first clear data point that emerges which shows that the Main Street economy, there is a bottom formation happening. Remember, in the financial markets in America, the bottom formation happened on March 23. And given that the financial markets are always anticipatory, it is just but obvious that they will run ahead of the Main Street economy. And that's precisely what is happening. Now from here on, Whether the journey continues, the snapback continues, will depend on how the Main Street economy comes back, the resurgence in the Main Street economy. And for that, we believe it is all in our hands, in the hands of us, our politicians in power and our bureaucrats. If the politicians and the bureaucrats do not start our economy again and again, as we might see resurgence in the COVID cases, flare up in the COVID cases, a spike up in COVID cases, I think we will be fine. We believe that through the lockdown, our governments have got enough breather to prepare for this eventuality, to prepare for managing effectively a snapback or a flare up that may happen due to COVID. And hence from here on, even though it may cause us some pain in the immediate, but for the ultimate goals, we should not let our economies shut down once again. At the same time, we have also been reiterating in our past videos and now again that we should not be too hopeful of a magical wand emerging by way of vaccines that will cure the virus. Why? Simply because our track record with viruses has been rather poor. We don't have an HIV virus vaccine yet. We don't have an Ebola vaccine, and we do have some influenza vaccine, but they don't work. So we have to, in most likelihood, go through this COVID crisis and brace for an herd immunity rather than either waiting for a vaccine, for a magical cure, or stop start our economies. So therefore, on summary, we quickly believe that yesterday the jobs data has been a groundbreaking bottom formation that has started taking place in the Main Street economy, and hence it was a very important and a vital statistics, due to which we felt that this video we have to publish immediately. That said, we would now move on to address some of the top questions or queries that our viewers have been posting after taking a listen to our videos. The first one among them is that most viewers have tried to ask us, why do we focus so much on American economy and the American financial markets? This is because American financial markets is the lead indicator of our investment world. The depth and the spread that American financial markets can offer, no other market in the world can offer in the times that we are presently living. Rather, markets, European markets, Indian markets, they all try to latch on and be in lockstep with the American financial market. And hence, to understand the American financial markets, we have to really get a very clear and deep understanding of the American economy, as well as the technology-led disruptive innovation that is the bedrock of American dream and American prosperity. And hence, all our focus is on America as well as the new emerging world tech superpower, China. And most of our conversation, therefore, in these videos have been around how America and China will be responding and will be posturing. The next question that often comes to us from our viewers is on the posturing side between America and China, and they are quite worried about the kind of blame game that is going on between these two tech superpowers. We believe the current posturing of both China and America are more in the form of rhetorics. Rhetorics because they want to divert the attention from their failures. Both of them has failed miserably in their basic acts. China surely could have done far better than what they did in preventing the export of the virus to the rest of the world. While on America's side, they were far behind the curve. They were in denial. They were slow to respond. And then obviously they needed a whipping boy, and then the blame game started. But then if you look above or rise above all this and look beyond the cliff into the horizon, what we basically see is that if America can find this second Sputnik moment, which means that the America's first Sputnik moment was when Russia marched ahead of America in its space odyssey. And then America pulled up its socks, quickly got its acts together, and were the first to put a man on the moon, peeping Russia or USSR to the post. If America likewise today can find a second Sputnik moment when they can pull up their socks, and instead of being the bedrock of tech-led disruptive innovation, innovative ideas, if they can actually get to the act of execution from their own soil, then that will be an extremely favorable situation for the whole world order, because then we will have a balance of power between the tech superpowers China and America, and that will be extremely good for competition as well as for all of us who are in the world that is beyond America and China. Hence, over longer term period, we feel that once we remove all these noise and the rhetorics, all that is happening in terms of posturing between America and China, in terms of trade, in terms of tariffs, retaliations, they will in the near term although will create a lot of protectionism, but in the longer term it will only lead to a fairer and a freer world. The third question that has come from many of our viewers is that are we getting set up for a second dot-com bubble bust? So the current, and this comes on the back of the fact that there has been a very clear disjoint or disconnect between, say, Dow Jones indices, S&P, and that of Nasdaq in the resurgence of the financial markets that we are seeing post the aftermath of COVID. If you see again, yesterday the markets also gave us a equally important groundbreaking data. Nasdaq for the first time claimed back its all-time high. But both S&P and Dow are still not there yet. At the same time, when the meltdown started due to COVID, Dow had fallen almost 33+% from its pre-COVID days. But Nasdaq in comparison fell slightly above 25%. So it fell less and came back faster with a vengeance. Normally, the ones that fall deep or fall the hardest also rebounds the fastest and the farthest, which did not happen this time. So are we getting set up for a second dot-com bubble bust? We again believe that no. And our conviction is because of the two main facts. First is, today the disruptive innovation plays that are driving the march of technology over the main street economy and the industry, essentially around gene technology, energy and storage, AI and robotics, blockchain, digital wallet and cryptos, and then cloud and edge computing. In fact, for the first four, the key to unlock the potential of the first four disruptive opportunities actually lies in our ability to harness cloud and edge computing. And that's where we have made stupendous progress in terms of very powerful, fast, better, efficient, cheaper processors. Today, we do not use the CPU of our machine that much as we use the GPU. And from there, we are now moving into the concept of DPU, or data center processing unit, where the whole entire data center is a processing bed in which super fast chips are computing humongous amount of data which we never could have computed in the past. And this is where the unlocking takes place in gene therapy, in reading gene, writing gene, in sequencing gene, in editing gene, and curing, therefore, and from there curing terminal illnesses much faster and much earlier than otherwise. Now, for all these kind of companies who are working on the forefront of disruptive innovation using technology, the public market is just giving them about $5-7 billion of market cap. During the dot-com bubble bust, the companies who walked in the forefronts of these technologies, those were internet companies and those were telecom companies. The public market was then giving them 50 plus billion, then 20 years back, giving them 50 plus billion of market cap, at least 10 times more than what they are giving today. On the other hand, if we flip this coin around and see in the private market, where mostly the investors are people who are in the know, they are actually giving a much higher multiples to these companies who are working on the forefronts of, or on the frontiers of disruptive technology. That's going to change our lives. Therefore, there is reason to believe that we are far away from the dot-com bubble bust kind of a scenario. The second analogy to this is that the kind of disruptive technology that we are working with in today's time, the 5 that I just named, if we really compare and go back in history, probably the only period that comes in relevance to this period is the 50-year period all the way up to 1929. This period that culminated in 1929 is what known in the American parlance as the Roaring Twenties. It all started about 50 years prior to 1929, and during these 50 years there were 3 game-changing disruptors that changed completely the way we then lived, worked and played in this planet. The first was energy, or electricity, the second being telephone, and the third being railroads or steam engine coming out of external combustion engines, which then transformed itself into internal combustion engines and eventually into automobiles. So essentially energy, communication and physical connectivity. The Roaring Twenties incidentally is one of the best periods of prosperity in the financial history of America in the 20th century. Many even attributing it to be the golden era. But during this period, if we look into the data, there has been more than 60 instances of yield curve, of negative yield curve. And in each of these occasions, the yield curve remained in the negative territory for a fairly long period of time. And on an average, the inversion in the yield curve was to the tune of, on an average, 100 basis points. And when it is in the average, 100 basis points means there have been several instances where the inversion has been much more than 100 basis points. As compared to that, today, when the Nasdaq has reclaimed its lifetime high, we have hardly seen negative yield curve situations even after a 10-year bull run. And the few instances that we have seen, the yield curve has remained in the negative territory for a few days, and on an average less than 10 basis points of inversion. So we are nowhere near a recession for which a precursor has been a protracted period of yield curve inversion and frequent bouts of yield curve inversions. Now let us understand why an yield curve inversion is so critical to recession and eventual depression. This is because in an yield curve inversion, the long-term interest rates are much lower than the shorter term. And that can only happen when there is a polarization between growth and inflation. That means on one side the growth is peaking and hitting a glass ceiling of 4, 5, 6%, while on the other side the inflation is tipping off the cliff to as low as 1% or even below. As things stand today, we are nowhere near it, and thanks to COVID, we will rather see from here on at least next few years where inflation will be rather on the higher side, while growth will be muted, given that a lot of consumption, especially discretionary consumption, will not happen given the kind of experience we just had. And why inflation should be a little higher on the scale? Because of the amount of money that has been thrown into the system through the quantitative easings. Hence, we are nowhere close to the polarization that is required for a protracted yield curve inversion. And hence, we do not see a perfect storm brewing on the other side of the cliff and led by technology, just because technology has done so well in this crisis. This period actually has no comparison in any way whatsoever with that of the dot-com bubble burst. With this, we will conclude this video and hope to come back as and when we see equally groundbreaking data and statistics that will help you all see beyond the obvious and make investment decisions that are equally groundbreaking and game-changing, so that you can exponentially grow your wealth and prevent it from being destroyed. But before we end, we will like to leave a pledge to stand up and voice our opinions against discrimination and oppression, and not look the other way each time we see somebody is bullied out there. This is in obvious reference to the street protests that are not just happening in America but in many cities around the world, and arising out of the recent police brutality. And we would like you to give this your best shot in terms of what you can do to make our world a freer and a fairer place, where we all can be equal, as we are all born free. Thank you.